Hello, everybody. My name's Chris Dorobek. I'm a journalist. So I was an editor of a publication called Federal Computer Week for a bunch of years, and then down there in Washington, D.C., we have a radio station called Federal News Radio, and I was the afternoon guy on Federal News Radio for a bunch of years. Now I do a blog and podcast that is through an outfit called GovLoop, and I'm also writing a book about how to do this job, because if you've ever sat in, well, you've all been in these sessions before, and you feel like Harry Potter Dementors are sitting here sucking the lifeblood out of the room. We're not doing that today, because look who we have. Also, I know you've been doing cards and stuff. We're not doing that. We're actually having conversations, so you guys can ask these fine-looking people questions, and we can find out what you think. How many people? Students? Oh, great. Industry people? Who are industry people? Okay, a couple industry. Government people? Are there government? Oh, look at that. So we only have 35 minutes, so we're going to be very efficient, and these are all government people, so their titles will take about 35 minutes. So, we're basically out of time. We're talking about threats, and I'm going to ask, but before we get into all that, I'm going to ask each of you to kind of tell people what you guys do, because it can be a little bit different in government. You guys have been at a couple different places. I'm going to start on my far side. That is Gail Gulford. She is the CISO or CISO? Which is correct? Put that in the next poll. CISO? We're going with CISO? All right. I'm going to say Chief Information Security Officer. How's that?
That's good.
Gail is with the gorgeous city of Baltimore, where we are residing right now. She is with the Baltimore city government. Tell us what you do for a living.
Hi. I'm responsible for cybersecurity, e-discovery, some physical security, investigations, testifying in court, keeping an eye on employees who like to do things that aren't supposed to be done on rare occasions, and keeping everybody as aware as possible, because we all know it's when, not if, you will have a cyber attack.
Biggest thing that keeps you up at night?
Biggest thing that keeps me up at night is the person who falls for a fish and the third-party vendors that are totally out of my control.
Dove mentioned the Target people, where they got in through an HVAC system,
That's correct.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Next to Gail is Stacy Dawn. Stacy is the Chief Information Security Officer at the Export-Import Bank of the United States, an organization that 4 people have heard of. What does the Export-Import Bank do? And then what do you do there?
The Export-Import Bank gives loans to companies here in the United States that want to export products to other countries. And I prefer CISO, sorry. But I'm the CISO there, and the things that keep me up at night we had talked about is we have a gap projected of 1.4 million cybersecurity professionals between now and 2020. And what we have to do with our youth and the people who want to enter that workforce to fill those gaps, because our adversaries are at us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Dove in the Podimon survey data showed that do your executives get this and care about this? And it was kind of like so. You've been at a bunch of different agencies, so I'm
Yes.
not just saying Import-Export Bank. Do folks in government get this? Is this something that matters? Is this important?
This is something that's very important, very, very, very important. And I think that our senior leaders are starting to really get their eyes open. They're coming to forums like this, and we're bringing ideas. Women on Capitol Hill is coming next week with DC Cyber Week. And so just getting the word out there, how important this is. They've stood up Cyber Command. So I think that it's taken a long time. It should have come sooner, but I think that we're really breaching that now.
Next to Stacy is Emery Kuslak. Am I doing it right?
Shuak.
Nowhere close to right. He's the Chief Information Security Officer. We'll do all this in one breath. Senior Official for Privacy in the Centers of Medicaid and Medicaid Services, which is, of course, part of the Department of Health and Human Services. Tell us what you guys do and what keeps you up at night.
We basically protect the information for everybody on Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare.gov, CHIP, and we have
like 17 people total?
You know, I'd say it's anywhere for about 150 million beneficiaries across the United States right now. It's actually a little bit more than that because we do both living and dead. So, you know, there are a number of beneficiaries who may have passed away, and we still have to protect that information as well.
Dead
so.
people don't complain as much, though.
But their relatives do.
Oh, yeah. Biggest threat that you're watching out there?
You know, we're looking at the threats from the outside, but I think we look at it a little different. We're trying to figure out how we can reach our constituency and our beneficiaries in a stronger way. And what we like to look at is how are we building in innovation? How are we enabling innovation? So everybody wants to jump on a cloud bandwagon or a DevOps bandwagon, and you know you can do that, but you have to make conscientious decisions to do it. And I think one of our biggest risks is managing expectations. How do we engage with the public and make it easier for us to embrace new ideas and new technologies without endangering the beneficiary data that's we're
when we ask
responsible
them,
for.
most of these people are students and they all want your job and want to be doing what you're doing. How did you get here? What choices did you make? Talk a little bit about your path.
For me, I've been in IT for, 25 years now. Actually, 25 years ago, I think I was teaching at UMUC.
Those big tape things, right?
Yes, actually, I was doing modem and telecommunications management for a large consulting group at the time.
For those kids out there, a modem used to be something that you would connect. Go to Smithsonian, you can see it.
But over time, I was a programmer. I was doing network, development and teaching, and then I was started working in compliance, and eventually worked up into operations as well. And prior to CMS, I was the deputy CISO for Homeland Security and different roles supporting Department of Energy and everything before that. So kind of a diverse consulting and government role.
Gail, how'd you get here?
Interesting path. In the 70s, IBM, in that time the Bell system, the technology leaders were looking for artistic majors because you have to be able to think out of the box and see your own picture when you're in technology. So I was scooped up and got some training in voice and data, and I was very fortunate. They sent me to MIT. Then I went on to work for them. I worked for a consulting firm, and I learned business. And then I became the head of IT for Baltimore City Police Department, which was a challenging job I did for 8 years. And one thing I came out of there knowing is security, because security for criminal data and witness data and victim data has been very strong for years. And guess what? You can be charged with certain crimes. You can be 95 years old. The law says you must maintain that criminal record for that person for 100 years, even though you are 95 years old. So that's where I learned about storage. I learned a lot about IT. You have to have a passion. You have to understand the business need, not just the technology need. You have to be able to speak English, not Chinese or Cyberese or Telecanese. You have to be able to speak English. And the path has always been about the arts part of me, wanting to know why something does something and why something else does not. The human, I love people, and we all know we stepped across the lines. So that was my path, which is very interesting, but there was no computer science when I came along.
Yeah.
So when I was going to school, it was before Al Gore invented the internet. And so I looked at what degree would get me. I was looking at becoming a manager, and computer science majors I learned were programmers sitting in a cube, and I'm a people person. And I think a lot of your CISOs have to be a business person and a people person in addition to the technology. So I said, well, what would be a good fit? And the best I could find back in the 80s was management information systems. But what I did was I took a lot of internships and jobs that worked somewhat with computers back then. And so I helped build my resume as a student to go into a career that dealt with computers. And then I entered civil service in '97, and I did a rotation through different areas of IT. And one of those areas was information assurance, which was the predecessor to what we call cybersecurity today. And information assurance was not sexy back then. It was all about compliance, and we have to tell you what to do, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and stopping people from doing things. And so I tried to find, with my business background, a way to keep things safe while being able to do the mission. And I built my career on being mission focused, not cybersecurity focused, but what can we do with cybersecurity to make sure that the mission takes place? So I work with the customers to make sure that their needs are met in the constraints of being safe online or protecting your data. Then we moved into, now you have to protect privacy data as well. So PII has become a big issue, and globally, not just in the United States, and overseas they're even more strict on privacy data. So for some of those students that we had in the room, if you look at what needs to happen in the next few years, big market in privacy. So I got here by looking at where are those gaps, what can I do education-wise to fill those gaps. My bachelor's degree is MIS, and then I got a master's in business and human resources management to take care of the people, to learn what the people need to do so that they can protect the information and help us. And that's how I ended up here.
Emery, and all of you, but I'm going to start with Emery. One of the hardest parts of this job feels like you spend your day telling people, no, they can't do this, no, they can't do that. And these days, with these marvelous little devices, guess what? If you keep telling them no, they'll just find a workaround. It was in the Pokemon data. They just go through, and then all of a sudden you have something connected to your network that you don't know about.
They call it shadow IT in a lot of places.
Yeah, exactly. The hidden stuff. How do you deal with? How do you not become the person that everyone says, "Oh, don't talk to them because they'll just stop us from doing what we're doing"?
Well, I mean, I think, two pieces. The first piece is that you want to be seen as a partner in this process. You need to not be the office of no, and engaging with the conversation and coming up with innovative ways to address the risk is really important. But the second piece is to know that it's coming. You need to stay abreast of what's coming. It's like, what's the latest in mobile technology? What's the latest in cloud technologies? What's the latest in all of these fields? Because somebody's going to want to do it as part of their businesses. They're trying to reinvent and modernize their business. They're thinking of that. I've got to be able to think about it so that I can get the right people in place, the right experience in place, to be able to figure out, okay, instead of saying no, let's talk about how do we make this happen. And there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of prepare yourself for it, as well as prepare your staff for it.
How do you avoid being the CIS no?
One is soft and one is hard. Soft, build the partnerships with the various agencies within the city. Go around and talk about cyber, and it will make bells go off in people's heads. The hard part is get a solid relationship with legal, procurement, and risk management. And don't let any contracts come through, even the elevator, even the electricity. No contracts go through without a cyber review, and then steal from legal and say it's cyber sufficiency. Therefore, my liability is a little lower. But the key is partnerships, a softness, and then a hardness.
Let's get them involved, but before I do that, let me ask all three of you about mentorship, because I've heard from people who get in these places, how did you find mentors that helped you become the people that you are? And also, what do you look in people that you would be mentors to?
Okay. I was fortunate. My mentors I found through my networking and connections. I also am a firm believer in partnerships like the multi-state ISAC or even in Deloitte. When I worked for Deloitte, I really had the opportunity to get mentors because consulting is all about knowing a little bit about everything and a whole lot about nothing. And those relationships.
But you tell people that you know a lot about everything.
No, the day you know everything, you're 6 feet under.
Oh.
But it's
They'll
important.
still have your records, though. It'll
Yeah,
be fun.
they'll still have my records. But it's the partnerships and taking the time to listen. Because if you listen, then the people will do the reverse and be willing to help you. If you come in like a bull in a china closet, you're not going to have a network. But don't be shy of conferences. Don't be shy of going to schools and meeting people. That's the only way you can get a mentor.
Don't be shy
And
about asking.
Don't be shy about asking.
People are happy to help.
Yes.
Mentors, both being one and having one.
So finding mentors coming up in computers back in the 80s was a little bit on the challenging side because there weren't that many mentors in the field yet. And finding strong women in the cybersecurity field has always been a challenge. And so I like to pay it back by taking on students as mentees, and I do a lot of STEM volunteer work. I am a member of AFCEA, the Armed Forces Communications Electronics Agency, and a firm, and I volunteer for these boards and working with students and bringing people up. So I think the biggest thing, like you said, is if you're looking for a mentor, ask. And if you ask for advice and the mentor gives you advice and you follow through on that, let the mentor know and say thank you and pay it forward. Let the mentor know when you've taken on a mentee. Because as you go through your career, you're going to be at different stages, and you're going to always want to have a mentor that's above you where you want to be, and you want to have a mentee that's coming in behind you. And you will be surprised as you go through your career how much you learn from your mentees as well as your mentors. So keep an open mind, listen, get out in the community, do conferences, do seminars, educational courses, and volunteer, and it brings so much to everybody, not just one person.
Emery, mentors, do you have one? And how'd you find this person? And have you been one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, yes, in both directions. You know, I don't know. I think in the 80s and the 90s, you know, my background was originally in electrical engineering, and obviously computer science was a happening thing at the time. So finding like-minded individuals that you wanted to work with was really easy at the time to kind of engage in that conversation. And I think it continues to today. You know, while I had some great mentors that I worked with back then, you know, it's still a matter of, you know, where are you making those connections today? And I've helped a number of people, and it's about making sure that, you know, why are you in this field? Are you in this field because you have a passion? If you have a passion about it, talk about it. If you talk about it in the right forms, you'll find like-minded individuals. I mean, I've been to every single B-Sides DEF CON meeting in the DC area for the last 5 years, and there's a lot of people who want to talk about, you know, what they're doing, where they're going with their career. I was just down in Fredericksburg for a DEF CON meeting a couple weeks ago, and we had people who had absolutely no understanding, and in fact I was a little surprised that she was turning an unpatched machine on in the room to, you know, people who have 20, 30 years of experience. But it's about finding your peers and finding, you know, those people who have the same passions and sharing those ideas.
Chris, can I throw something in about
Yeah,
mentoring?
go.
I ran my first business in the late 80s and early 90s. And when I was hiring people to build networks, well, there was nobody to hire. I had to find people who had some level of educational background that fit and had an attitude and an aptitude, and I had to train them. And the great thing is, I can tell you a lot of years later that the people who worked for me are now CISOs. I prefer CISO, but CISO sounds good. It kind of sounds a little more esoteric. There's CTOs and CIOs, and there's a Facebook group from my old company, and it's kind of cool to see these people. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, seeing where they've gone and how much they've had an impact in their careers.
Was it one of the Facebook groups that got hacked? No. All right, questions. I know, and no one likes to ask the first question, so we bypass the first question. You'll ask the second question, and we'll just be done with it. Otherwise, I'm going to come and call on somebody, so thank you. I'm not shy. I'll hold this.
Okay.
That way I don't look like I have something to do.
Absolutely, thank you. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate the information and knowledge from the panel. One of the questions, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Dr. Millie Eswick. I'm the director for National Cybersecurity Institute at Excelsior College.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is. So the question is that I find a lot of, we are online university. We have with adult learners just like UMUC. And we have folks with a tremendous background that want to go into kind of a career pathway, their mid-careers, and they possibly can do the CISO or CISO work. But the problem is finding those organizations who are willing to take a chance with someone sometimes out of their, their organization. Because normally I find these roles to be kind of someone they groom from kind of within sometimes, number one. And number two, also, the report, there's two things. So how does someone get in from the mid-career aspect? That's one question. The second question is, there is a battle I hear in the C-suite about who CISOs or CISOs report to. So there's always this big argument about you want to make sure if you go into a role that you have direct, relationship with the CEO. Or there's some that say, well, you're reporting to the CIO who then reports to CEO. So that's kind of, so there's two questions. They kind of differ in aspect.
Dov, I'm going to have you start actually on the question about who reports to whom. Does this matter, and what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it most definitely matters. So now I'm not talking about the Pomerman study. There's a bunch of other studies we're involved in without naming things. But one of the discussions that I've been involved in relates to something called a data protection officer. So if anybody here is familiar with the European data protection regulation called GDPR, if you're not, you will, you should be. You have rights as a data subject. You have a right to privacy. You have a right to your information not being spread where you don't want it to be.
It just feels so, a data subject feels so wholesome, doesn't it? Yeah. Just delightful.
But the truth of the matter is that it's a very important concept, that you are a data subject. The minute you sign up for anything, anywhere, electronically, you're a data subject, and you should have rights. So this concept of data protection officer is very important, and it is supposed to report to the board or the CEO. This is a kind of an ombudsman to respect and advocate for the rights of the people whose data is being supplied to the company. And that person should be independent, has to be independent. If they report to somebody who has another agenda, there's something missing, it's not working. And this concept that GDPR advocates for, it's called data privacy by design. This person's job is to think about the business process of collecting and using and eventually destroying private information. That has to be an independent position, in my opinion. I don't see how it works otherwise. And the law, the GDPR law, makes it very clear that it's got to be.
Feels like everyone's eventually going to be reporting to the CEO, for goodness sakes. I mean, every single part of the organization. Where do you report?
I report to the CIO. I can honestly say...
All three of you report up through CIOs, right?
CIO.
Yeah.
I can honestly say to you that almost 40% of what I do, the CIO does not know about, because I'm reporting to the Office of Inspector General as well. Because when you get to that point that what's legal and what's illegal, then you kind of shift from the CIO to the Office of Inspector General. Now, as they more define in the future the role of the cybersecurity InfoSec team, you might see some changes. And then your other question was, how do you get in? Yeah.
How do you get a job? And they say you can't get a job until you have a job, and you can't have the job until you get the job. It's this circle.
It's so important to be members of organizations where you can learn, but more importantly, you meet people and the mentor, but also the companies represented. You'd be amazed how many, I'll be honest, I've spoken in another panel, and when we had an issue in Baltimore City, me and my staff were really cracking up, because 2 weeks after I got through all of the voicemails, 10 of them were people saying, oh, I know Baltimore's going to fire you. Just wanted you to know you can start here in Philadelphia. You can start here in Denver. I mean, literally, I had
That's so sweet.
shorts. It was sweet, but it was a result of attending structures like this and not being afraid to talk to people. You know, you won't make it as a CISO if you're afraid to just go up and talk to people.
So I've been civil service a long time, and they changed the federal hiring process where all of the jobs are posted on USA Jobs. And a lot of people outside of government think that it's a black hole. And I don't believe that. It's not. As a hiring manager,
We're not going to put her on a lie detector test, let's just say.
as a hiring manager, I have never pre-selected. I did over probably 40, 45 hiring actions in my career so far. And some of the positions are open to only Gov, but if you look, there are so many deficit in cybersecurity right now. There are positions open to the public. So get your application in and follow up with the point of contact that's on the job application.
The problem with that is a lot of these people haven't had their first, so it's that cycle that you get in. You can't get that, once you have the job, then you get into a place where, okay, you can get your next one, but it's getting that first one, getting in the door.
And that's why it's so important to do internships, volunteer work, that you can get those contacts, go to the conferences, go to meetings, spend the time in investing yourself.
So are the internships posted on USA Jobs too?
Yes.
Okay.
For the federal government. I don't know outside of federal, because I've only been federal.
How can somebody, they want to be your employee, how do they do that?
One is definitely an opportunity for internships. I think what we see a lot, what I see a lot is, after working at DHS and CMS, I've seen thousands and thousands of resumes of people who've an academic background. But what I'm looking for is somebody who has some practical experience, and one is through internships. You can apply at any time to the federal government. We're always looking for interns as well. The other approach that we're trying this year is cognitive apprenticeships. So cognitive apprenticeships is where we bring in candidates who are high-performing candidates who may have a little bit of technical background but a strong interest. And this year we're actually piloting the program with a series of veterans where we bring them in and they go through a challenge-based learning experience where they try capture the flag and learning experiences. Then we put them on the floor. They apply that knowledge directly. So, one of the things that we see is a lot of people come with a lot of academic understanding, but they lack complete confidence in being able to apply it. So in addition to internships, we like this apprenticeship model that we're piloting this year to see, can we bring people on? Can they learn it? Can they go back to the training? Can they reapply it? And come up with new and innovative ways to kind of get you over that hurdle of building experience.
Hi, who are you?
Hi, my name is Deli. So I just wanted to know, as a CISOs, do you have a big say-so when it comes to the cyber budget? So a good example is role-based training, because we always complain that we don't have enough skilled resources, but role-based training is one of the big ones. So do you have a say-so into that?
I can honestly say, the first 3 years I was a CISO, the budget was 0.00. I don't think you can get any bigger than that. You have to be creative, which is why I feel that thinking outside of the box is so important, and you have to be fortunate to have staff that are patient, and creative as well. And then you have to become, they call me a bag lady, because I literally went to every conference that Director Dr. Phyllis spoke, who used to be in charge of Homeland Security. I went there. Everything that was free, I got in her face and asking for what she does for the feds to do for Little Baltimore City. Took me about 8 months. I got more than I ever imagined.
Go fast, because I want to get one more question in before we wrap up. So.
Not enough in the budget, because our budgets are pretty flat right now. And if you think about a flat budget, you still have increasing costs in your maintenance fees, so it's really a decrease even if your budget's the same for the next year.
How much budget control do you have?
I've had my budget doubled every year for 4 years.
So there's the guy you want to
Are you
work
hiring?
Well, have healthcare.gov affect your organization.
Yeah, exactly. It's all those dead people that you're watching. Give these young people and people who are choosing second careers and students, give them a piece of advice.
I think, really, as we said earlier, go out and network, because that's where you're going to make the connections, that's where you're going to make the opportunities. My deputy is now the CISO for Small Business Administration. My staff from DHS are in most of the major agencies across the federal government. It's about who you made, the connections that you make, and leveraging these experiences like these events here.
When also, if you can't hire, what's a good organization, like SBA is doing all sorts of amazing stuff right now, right? And who are the interesting people? And so talk to these people. You're smart people, so yeah, offer advice.
Combination of formal education and certifications, so that when you do apply for jobs with your internships and background, we know you have at least some base of knowledge coming in, and show your initiative and follow up.
Simple piece of advice. Internships, residence, anywhere you go, remember what you have to sacrifice to get in. Just because you have a college degree, or just because you have 20 years experience on a firewall, does not mean you can walk in the door and be a cybersecurity professional or a CISO. You have to, I want to say almost be humble, but that's not really the word I would like. But you have to understand your worth, but understand that you will always only be one link in a chain that forms the team of cybersecurity.
I'm going to do moderator's privilege and offer you one too. Care about learning. Learning doesn't stop, and you're already learning this so much. So thank you. Please join me in thanking them. Awesome job.